I'm Marisa Norcross.
And I'm Dave Freund, and this is The Next Page. Marisa, how are you?
I am good. I'm so excited for today's conversation.
You are?
Yes.
Well, why?
Because I feel like you must have known that I needed this right now. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
So we had a challenge before we get into this week's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So my challenge was that I was going to block out time in my schedule at work. And I'm going to say this, but it's dangerous because some of the people, but not everybody at work listens. Only a few do. So shame on them for not listening. I mean, actually, I was going to tell you, we have a country that is rapidly becoming our second most listened to country, and it's Spain.
Interesting.
We must have a listener in Spain that is listening like on a routine basis because I see 125 downloads in Spain in the last 12 months, which just ironically is how many episodes we've posted. So somebody in Spain is listening.
Awesome.
So if you're in Spain and you're listening, send us an email.
Yeah.
And tell us, how did you discover The Next Page? But anyways, that had nothing to do with, I had it up, so I thought I would tell you that because I was pretty excited about that. And also our listeners over the last 12 months have doubled.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Isn't that great?
Yes.
So, Rachel Hollis would be so proud of us because she would say, you just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you build the following. So I had promised to that I was going to schedule time. And one of the mistakes I made was I would put hold time on my calendar. And I quickly realized that my colleagues do not respect something on my calendar that says hold time. So I put deep work on. And lo and behold, they're not scheduling over deep work. Because before, when you were working full-time, the only person that I had given permission to write over my deep work was you.
I'm honored.
Because you respected my time.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so now let's see if we can get these other people to keep respecting it. But I did it. I blocked in time. Now, my problem is it's going to take me several weeks to be able to really appreciate that because my calendar was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So how about you? You really, mine was easy. Mine was just like, don't do work stuff during the day, but you had to do something challenging.
I agreed to accept your challenge to set aside 2 mornings where I would wake up early because I had shared that the only way I was really going to be able to set aside intentional time for thought in my thinking chair, which I talked about last week.
Yep.
Or was it 2 weeks ago now? That I can't remember. Time flies. But recently I talked about my thinking chair and you challenged me to wake up early because I said that the only way it's really going to happen for me is if I wake up very early and go through my ideal morning routine. And so I did wake up early 2 mornings last week. And I did do my
outstanding.
I did do my ideal morning routine, which is like a strange ritual of things that I do.
I sense a but.
And yes, so both mornings, both my girls woke up more than an hour earlier than they normally would. So, while I did get the early morning routine part in, the thinking part did happen. It just didn't happen when I had planned for. But I did make the effort to find other time in my week twice to put some intentional thought into things. And it was great because it really helped me kickstart something that had been kind of in the back of my mind that I knew I had to work on, but I just kept saying, oh, next week,
sure,
or tomorrow. Sure. And I had a collection of thoughts in my head that I hadn't gotten down on paper. Well, luckily I was able to get them down on paper, transferred my handwritten notes into a Word document on my computer because it will be something I have to share with others soon.
Sure.
So, not perfect, but a success nonetheless, and something to keep working towards. And it felt good.
Hey.
It felt good to be getting up early like that. And it's definitely something I want to continue. Maybe not every day right now, but getting there.
Good. That's outstanding. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's just, and that kind of feeds into today's topic, because so my post that went out this morning is called 2 Tons of Fertilizer. And when I started thinking about, I had actually listened to a podcast that talked about building margin into your day. Mm-hmm. And when I listened to it, I started thinking about, this is really, and we're going to do a flip where we're not talking about work. I really want us to talk about somebody that like is in your situation, mm-hmm. Or any of us that are trying to balance a lot of things. We have a lot of, we have a lot of working women that listen to our podcast, and working men that are trying to balance a lot of home and responsibilities. They don't want to feel like they're failing on the home front, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so I really want to focus more on what's going on outside of work. And next week we'll talk about building margin at work. But I thought there was a commercial or an ad when I was a teenager, and the phrase went something like, well, that's like trying to haul 2 tons of fertilizer in a 1-ton truck. And just the imagery of that is, if you're trying to haul 2 tons of fertilizer in a 1-ton truck, you're going to get covered in fertilizer. Mm-hmm. And we often try to pack so much into our life that we end up getting covered in fertilizer. And we have to stop. Mm-hmm. And we have to really take a step back and assess what is really important, what are we really doing, and are there better ways to do it? So when you read through my post, what thoughts went through your mind?
I mean, like I said, I thought this was strongly directed toward me. It was exactly what I needed to hear, because I think that it's something that a lot of people can relate to. And I'm so glad that you mentioned just a few moments ago working women and working men, because
right.
I know that the role of like parenthood has shifted completely. And it's
yes.
not just, like when my grandmother talks about parenting, it was something that she did pretty much on her
right.
own. My grandfather worked
right.
and she handled everything at home. And it's so different now. And so I'm so glad that you brought up that, because there are so many fantastic working fathers that are also balancing home life and work life right. along with their spouses.
Exactly.
And I just feel like it's something that is missing in our society as a whole. And it's also cultural. And even if you look at what students are experiencing right now, as young as middle school and high school. My sister-in-law is a teacher in North Carolina, and she just shared with me today that one of her classes had a test today, so there was no homework. She is a special ed teacher that pushes into other teachers' classrooms, so she doesn't mm-hmm. necessarily determine homework and things like that, but she did share that the students will get upwards of 2 hours a night of homework. And I believe she mostly has 6th graders.
Wow.
And like more than 2 hours of homework a night. That is a lot of, when you think about the day of a student or the day of a mother or a day of someone that works full time or part time, whatever. I mean, that's a lot of time. And then to tack on the homework and
sure.
all the other things that happen at home, or if you're active in your church or with volunteer projects, whatever it might be. I mean, that's a lot to throw in. And so I think as a whole, our culture has glorified busyness and has
right.
glorified involvement, right? I mean, we're bombarded with opportunity to volunteer, to plan things, to have play dates. Let's meet at the library, on top of all of our other like essential sure. functions, right?
Sure. Yes.
So
yeah, and you almost are guilted into, well, if let's say with kids in school, well, if your kids aren't playing sports, there's something wrong with you as a parent.
Right. If they're not playing multiple sports, a sport every season.
Right. And so exactly. And
mm-hmm.
I remember when our kids were growing up, we really focused and said, listen, we'd love you to learn to play an instrument. That was really important to me when I was in school. And so all of our kids played an instrument in school. And one of the neat things that my dad did for my kids was, even after he retired, when they got to an age where they were very accomplished with their instruments, it was typically would have been like mid junior high years, he would buy them an instrument, a new instrument that would have been more on a, a professional level instrument that played very, very well. And the neat part is my daughter Bethany still plays her French horn, and so we didn't push our kids into doing sports. We actually kind of just said, listen, do you really, discouraged it. Hey, you can play for fun, but you start going on a team and now you've got practices all the time. And some people probably said, well, that's terrible that you didn't. We had chosen this avenue. Other parents may have chosen the athletic piece. Mm-hmm. But I think the key is, one of the points that I put into my post this morning was we need to prioritize.
Right.
And John Maxwell always talks about his 3 R's. And the 3 R's are this: what's required. And so those would be things and now we're not talking work, we're talking outside of work. What things are required for us as parents, as homemakers, as, people maintaining homes, those kinds of things, and identify what do we absolutely positively have to do. Mm-hmm. The next priority that you want to do is what gives me the greatest return. So with the least amount of effort, which is going to be in my gifted area, because I can do that best. If I put an hour in this, what's it going to give me on the other end, so to speak, in terms of return? But the third one is what gives me the greatest reward. That's what speaks to my heart. And I think if we can just sit down and make a list, what's required, what gives me the greatest return, what gives me the greatest reward, we can now begin to assess, are some of these, well, actually, if you start writing down what you think is required, you may find some of it isn't. Mm-hmm. There may be some self-imposed requirements that we have placed upon ourselves. And so, one of the things, and then you have to say, okay, so of the things that are required, is there something I could automate? Now, I know you're going to say, wait, I thought we were talking about work. We're not. We're not talking about work. We're talking about home. And I was really surprised to hear some of it I knew. You can send your menu or your grocery list to a grocery store, to like Wegmans or Walmart, mm-hmm. and they will put it all together for you.
Yep.
And you just go pick it up. So
or have it delivered. You can
have it delivered. So let's say we're gonna go pick it up. We just mm-hmm. kind of drive in.
Yep.
And it's waiting for us. Because I remember once, I think it was my daughter-in-law said she had sick kids. She wasn't going to take them into the store. She typically didn't do this, but she just sent the message, emailed them, whatever, mm-hmm. and she pulled up and they put it in her car.
Yeah, it's an app. You just load it all right up.
So how much time do you spend at the grocery store? See, I don't shop.
I'd say, because it's not just the time at the store. It's driving to the store, shopping,
right,
checking out, loading it into my car, unloading it into my house, putting it all away. I'd say grocery shopping takes 2 to 2.5 hours. I do it all on Sunday, typically. Okay. So, I mean, some people split it up over a couple of days.
Yep.
But it takes me a few hours. And I meal plan, so that takes a little bit of time. But, yeah.
Okay. So think about that. So somebody's going to say, well, wait a minute. It costs you $15 extra. Or I don't know what the cost is to have them put. Do you know what the cost is to have them put up?
It depends. Like the way Instacart works, certain items have different markups on them, from anywhere from a few cents to 50 cents. And then typically you just pay like an annual subscription, which is pretty low for if you did delivery. But I would say that someone's time would, for someone who finds this to be something that is a pain point for them, where they could be using the time for something a lot great with a lot greater of a return or a reward, it would not be cost prohibitive. I think it would be worth it.
And I will give you a true life example. So if I would be going shopping with my wife, mm-hmm. we would spend more additional on groceries.
Yes.
Than if we would use Instacart and mm-hmm. have to pay for it. Because I will buy the extra stuff.
Yeah.
Now, my wife's much more disciplined. So if I literally was the person that had to go do the grocery shopping, it would be money ahead for us to use something like Instacart.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about when I say, can you automate something? One of the neat ones that I saw a commercial for just this past weekend was prescriptions where they can, like pill pack or something. So if you're a person that has to take multiple meds, you can do online pharmacies, and for no additional money, they put it into a package per day.
Oh, wow.
I'm thinking, like, my parents need to do this just so they can keep track of their meds, right?
Yeah.
But here's another one. How much time do you spend at the pharmacy getting your monthly prescription? Well, why not do it online? And all the online ones are 90 days.
Well, it's also not necessarily like the amount of time, but the mental, like,
Sure.
Okay, I have to remember to refill my prescription. I have to remember to pick it up before they restock it. It's kind of just like relieving yourself of that mental load and just saying like we take vitamins. My girls take vitamins. We take, my husband and I know how many I take a day. I know how many are in the bottle. And I have it on a subscription from Amazon. Well, sometimes from Amazon, sometimes from Target.
Yes.
And it just shows up. The same thing for my daughter's diapers and wipes. I never have to make sure that I'm like, I know what's in my back stock or whatever. I just, Target delivers them for me.
See, you are already building margin in. The problem is that too often we fill the gap where you have to protect the gap. Yeah. There are some other amazing things that I never thought of that we can automate in our homes. You know, so we're not supposed to call engineer Tim because he's not an engineer. So he's
our producer.
He's our producer. So producer Tim loves his smart devices. And so think about this. Why aren't we automating more things in our homes so that, you know, this was a neat one. So about a year ago it was exactly a year ago on Black Friday kind of thing, there were some great deals on Nest thermostats. So I finally broke down and I bought a Nest thermostat. What I love is, I finally fired up the wood stove last week. I love the fact that I can go in and look at exactly how many hours my furnace ran.
Yeah, me too.
And I was so excited that my furnace hadn't run at all for a week.
Wow.
Until this morning. Because I forgot to stoke the stove and it got a little cool. But anyways, think about areas that you can automate like that. Now, there's another one and this is the one where I think people can get margin into their life if they would just not be quite so proud. And it's this: chores around the house. My mother loves to iron. I don't think my wife and I have ever asked her to iron anything for us. But she loves to do it. I don't like ironing. I don't think my wife likes ironing. My wife is an amazing person with an iron. Like, my clothes look wonderful. But I know she doesn't like to do it. Now the problem is my mom's 88 and in Florida right now, so it'd be kind of hard. But my mom used to actually take in ironing for people.
Oh, wow.
Because she loved to do it, and so they paid her.
Wow.
So how many hours do people spend at an ironing board?
Yeah.
The other thing is house cleaning. There are some people that hate to clean houses. There's other people that actually enjoy it. And I remember when I was growing up that my mom had a friend that went to our church, and my mom was a nurse. My dad was a plant manager for a factory. And this woman really needed some extra money. Her husband didn't have a very well-paying job. He didn't have any skill set, so he was pretty much like a laborer type of, lower hourly wage earning kind of person. But a hardworking guy, he just didn't have any skill set. So my mom would have her come in once a week to clean the house. My mom didn't have to clean. The lady made a few dollars, which was great for her. It was the money that she could spend on herself type of thing. She loved doing it. So I think there may be times when we might not be willing to let somebody do something because maybe we'll think we're embarrassed, cutting your grass. So maybe you can't afford a lawn service, but maybe there's a kid that would be happy to cut your grass. And how much time could you save there? So I think the key of adding margin into our life is really sitting down and prioritizing what's required, what gives me the greatest return, what gives me the greatest reward. maybe in terms of return piece, maybe I'm really skilled in a certain area and I can do something really quick and my buddy can't, but we're opposite skills. Trade off with each other. I'll do this for you if you do this for me, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think the point is we just have to be able to admit sometimes that maybe we're not the best person to do that and somebody else should. And it's not a failing to say that that's just not my giftedness. I'm going to let somebody else do that. Something else I wanted to touch on was, so you talked about building your menus or menu prep.
Mm-hmm.
So have you ever heard of people that will like take one, like a Saturday afternoon and cook for the week?
Yes. I am not one of those people, but I have heard of it.
Yeah. So there are people that do, there's a book. I forgot what the book's called.
It's like cook for a day, eat for a week or something like that,
cook
right?
Cook once, eat all week.
Yes. Cook once, eat all week. I am familiar.
And it's written by a woman, Casey Joy Garcia. Mm-hmm. And she literally wrote a book on you cook once and you can eat it. You eat different things all week.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my wife has started doing this because she loves to give meals to folks.
Mm-hmm.
But she'll cook. The other night she was cooking this and cooking that and cooking something else. And I'm like, what are you cooking for? Well, we'll have the food.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just prioritizing. My wife I think she likes to cook. She's an amazing cook, but she will specify a time when she's going to do it. And then she does it and she doesn't have to worry about it. You know, seasonal things, canning things.
Mm-hmm.
You could, making applesauce. My wife and producer Tim, made a whole, I don't know how many, I think it's a bushel of apples, but they made applesauce for the season.
Mm-hmm.
It's all done. They did it once. They went in, they, hunkered down, got it done. And now it's in the freezer ready to be eaten.
Yep.
So do you have any other ideas of how we could automate, simplify, or add margin other than the ones we talked about?
I think it would be unique to each, household, I guess, what makes sense to automate or do ahead, things like that. But I think what really I want to make sure we spend just a couple minutes talking about is then what you do with that margin.
Exactly.
Right? Like you mentioned it briefly that we need to protect that margin.
Yes.
And I've happened to today listen to 2 podcasts that talked about this a little bit. And one of the podcasts specifically talked about like how her family was shifting from a yes family to a no family.
Love it.
Or a not right now family.
Yep.
And I think I've talked about that a little bit, how we've had to say no to a few things, but I think that's an important reminder. Just, just because you have the time doesn't mean you should fill it.
Right.
Because we talked about this too in our bucket list episode, that when that margin is when we have the opportunity to do things out of the ordinary with our families or experience things that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to experience, because we're so very good at filling our time with commitments.
Right.
And so I think we, should at least touch a little bit more on how to not fill those
gaps. No, that's great. So think back to the beginning of the podcast where I said that when I had to put margin time into my schedule, and I had to change what I called it so that people would respect it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, once we've done our prioritization, when we get down to the third R, what gives us the greatest return? Those are the things that speak to our heart. Those are the things that are meaningful to us. And if we have families, it's going to be our families and family time. I think we literally need to schedule family time, schedule date nights, and a lot of young people would say, well, we don't have a babysitter that we can trust.
Oh, I can solve that for you. I can solve that one.
You have a babysitter?
No. Here's what you do. You do a babysitting trade. I meant to mention this when we were talking about automating.
That's where I was going. Go ahead. Share it.
As that you find another couple who also wants to have a date night and you say, we will watch your 2 kids or however many kids we will watch your kids this weekend so that you guys can go out. And then next weekend, you will watch our kids so we can go out.
Perfect. That's exactly where I was going.
Yes. I had to interject because I was very excited about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so here's a bit of advice from somebody that's been married 38 years. The best thing that parents can do for their kids is to focus on the marriage relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember when I got married, my dad actually had the wedding service, and he said, you know, the greatest gift that a father can give his children is to love their mother. And so take care of your relationship first. Mm-hmm. Get it scheduled, get it on the calendar, and then also schedule game nights with the kids, movie nights with the kids where you're going to, you know, watch a movie, make some popcorn, whatever it is, play games. Mm-hmm. And if you get those things on your calendar, when somebody says, hey, you say, oh, I'm sorry, we're tied up that evening. So maybe it's an expansion of the bucket list concept. Right. And we just plan out the next month or the next season that this is what we're going to do. Because if you don't put something on the schedule, life will fill it. Mm-hmm. And don't be afraid. I love when you said to, you know, instead of being a yes family, being a no family. And what you meant was, you know, we're not going to say yes to everybody that asks us. I remember when I had to learn the lesson, sometimes you have to say no to the good to make time for the best. And if you can't say no to the good, you'll never have time for the best. Mm-hmm. So that really just wraps up into this margin piece. If you try to haul 2 tons of fertilizer in a 1-ton truck, you're going to get covered in fertilizer. And nobody wants a life that's got fertilizer all over.
And everyone can see it when you have the fertilizer on you.
Right. They can tell because you look that way. It's not, you can't hide it. It's everywhere. No. It's called chaos.
Mm-hmm. I think we are all happier, healthier, better versions of ourselves when we have that margin.
Exactly.
Because then when something really, really, really awesome comes around, you have the space to take advantage of it.
Right. You are absolutely right. I think we covered it. Mm-hmm. So just a reminder for all of our listeners, what's required, what gives me the greatest return, what gives me the greatest reward. Those are the 3 R's we prioritize with. Look at your required and see if you can offload them. Mm-hmm. See if you can automate them. I really think the Instacart might be a really brilliant idea.
Target Drive Up, that's free.
Target Drive Up, some of those meals in a box type of thing. I know some folks that use that. Mm-hmm. Depending on what your budget can allow. Don't be afraid to ask somebody for help. And I love the idea of sharing babysitting services. Mm-hmm. I'll watch your kids this weekend so we can go out, or so you can go out, and next weekend you do it for me. And when because you can trust your friend. Yep. And you're all in the same boat. And please, especially for the young families, mom and dad, make sure you schedule the date nights for yourselves, because your kids are going to be looking to see how you treat each other, not just how you treat them. So, any plans for this weekend?
We are down to the last few items on our bucket list, actually.
Wow,
so,
you did awesome.
Yeah, and we've started talking about what our winter one is going to look like.
Good.
So just checking off those things, it's been so fun. It's been so
exciting.
And I took your advice, and I have been making sure to photograph everything that we've done, and I will be making a photo book after.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Good. So next week, we're going to talk about margin in the workplace.
Awesome.
All right.
Sounds good.
So with that, I'm Dave Freund.
I'm Marisa Norcross.
This was The Next Page.